Julia, feel free to ask anyone, Vladimir, or whoever may want to ask a question, please go ahead. But I was going to ask, for any technical author or anyone else brave enough, what's the biggest mistake you've made in terms of documentation? Anybody wants to answer?
Screenshots with passwords?
Or at least IP addresses.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I can think of a case where the screenshot included an instant messaging chat, where the instant messaging chat happened to have some inappropriate language and in fact a completely inappropriate conversation. Yeah.
Screenshot done with a camera or some photographic device instead of using the software solution.
Taking a photo of
screenshots.
I've certainly, the way that we build documentation at Canonical, a lot of it is built from discourse, and there's a single page that is the index for all the pages, and it's basically a table in Markdown. And this table can have hundreds of rows, and it's very easy to make a mistake, put something in there wrongly, or forget to put a pipe to end a row. And when you do that, the entire site is broken, and usually because everything is so carefully cached by the way that the documentation is built, you often mess the whole site up and not other related documentation sets published from the same instance of discourse. Yeah, Sharon.
Remember when I broke the Microsoft?
Yeah, that was something just like that. Yeah, and we've all done it. Yeah. So it looks really catastrophic when you do it, until you realise it's probably just a missing pipe in a Markdown file. Anybody else? What about I don't know, is there something from the list anybody else wants to ask? Otherwise I'm gonna
Sorry, I was just remembering when Peter, who isn't with us, deleted the entire Git repository for the Gigi documentation because he thought he was only removing his own local book.
Yeah.
But he actually deleted the whole thing.
Yeah. Might have to beep his name out of this recording, but yeah. Did we then have some? Actually, I mean, Git is kind of the surface. Git seems quite easy to kind of work with, but it can very quickly get very complicated. And I mean, you must know this till it gets very difficult, doesn't it?
What?
Working with Git.
Yes. But Git is designed for programming, for code, but one can use it for documentation. I use it for all the content which I create on Open Printing. I use Git, and I did never accidentally delete all the web content of Open Printing.
I should introduce you, Till. I mean, a lot of us are technical authors, but Till here is the person responsible for Open Printing, the organization that manages a lot of printer compatibility in Linux. And
I'm the printing guru, not only for Ubuntu, but for free software in general, as Open Printing is an upstream organization. The main part of Open Printing is CUPS. And so Michael's suite is in our core team. And what I'm mainly doing in Open Printing, I'm leading Open Printing, and I'm integrating CUPS with the distros. And I'm also doing the communication and community stuff, because Michael Sweet, the author of CUPS, is a genius of an engineer, and he does a great design of CUPS and of the Internet Printing Protocol. The Internet Printing Protocol is the protocol which every modern printer uses, and Michael Sweet did good part of that. And he did also all the extensions and enhancements in the Internet Printing Protocol to lead it into the version 2, so that we have driverless printing, so that you connect a printer to your Linux machine, phone, and many other operating systems, and the printer just works. So no plug and play anymore. You plug in the printer and play for hours with the drivers, and when you are lucky, you win the game and can print. We have plug and print. You plug in the printer and you can print. And this is what we are doing at Open Printing. I'm on very many conferences. As I said, I do the community and communication part too. And therefore, and here I'm currently on the Ubuntu Summit. And this year I've been on 8 conferences. And on Open Printing, I am every month writing monthly news post. You find it under news and events, a blog. But with all this stuff, I have no time really to do documentation. So I have in the last 2 years, I've created the Puppet retrofit library. I've created libcaps filters too, but I didn't do any documentation. So we are really in search of documentation at Open Printing, and people who are volunteering, writing documentation for the developers, for the libraries, so for all the functions in the libraries, for administrators and for users. And therefore I'm participating in Canonical's Open Documentation Academy as an organization in search of documentation.
And that's wonderful. And I think
I'm the first organization outside Canonical participating.
And actually, just today, I've been able to speak to the folks on Thunderbird, and they're really keen for us to try and help get some of their outstanding documentation issues onto the Academy. So I think they'll be the second one after Open Printing, which will be good.
So your biggest mistake with documentation was just not having any, or just not having enough, right?
Yeah, yes, and Heather and Monica from Thunderbird are here. So if you want to talk with them and introduce and talk with them about documentation and so on, they are on the Thunderbird booth. And so tomorrow there's enough time to talk with them. Unfortunately, they did not come to this hacker room. I don't know whether they attend another hacker room.
Yeah, we have already spoken to them today, so we will follow up. We've been invited to the Thunderbird secret documentation group on Matrix.
Secret documentation group. And I always thought that Thunderbird is an open source project, free software project, where everything is developed in the open. And documentation is not a security bug. You don't need to do it in a secret channel.
Okay, I think final question.
And you find more technical authors if you do it in the open.
But yeah.
I would move a laptop closer to you, but maybe you could stand here in the camera view, because the recording will only contain the your view.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, I'll move over there. But let's ask another question. What do you fancy? It's okay, thank you. This is a good one. How do you explain what you do to other people as a technical author?
I mean, the simple answer is, user guides that you get with literally everything you buy. Basically that.
What, like IKEA manuals?
Yeah, sure.
Only without so many images.
I'm not very good at drawing though. So
yeah.
But it should be a tutorial, not only a how
to. This is, I mean, it can be quite a difficult conversation to have. Because you say that at Canonical, we don't do quite so much writing anymore. We still do a lot of writing, but the authoring part comes from trying to help other people, because especially developers, because the developers are the ones who have the key insight and the ideas behind the implementation that they're documenting.
Yes, and the developers are putting too much time into coding. They are not the good example as Michael Sweet is. Michael Sweet is not only an excellent engineer in terms of coding, he documents everything with which he is writing. And so you have all documentation for all functions in libcaps, but not in libcaps filters, because this is mine and not Mike's. And
yeah, okay.
And you have And you have also excellent documentation for the user and the administrator, all configuration file formats, all commands, and everything. The CUPS documentation is excellent. You should look at it as an example. You find it on Open Printing in the CUPS section of it.
Mhm.
It looks like there's new messages maybe in the chat.
Yeah.
Can we,
Can you see
Yeah.
it?
Using the
if you
chat.
want, I can.
The back part
Yeah.
of it's open. No, just on
This-
that.
So the audio still isn't clear.
Well, I hear it in the head.
Yeah, I don't know if it's your audio setup, Peter, but I'll check it in the recording and hopefully it'll be better.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hi Peter. Your audio
Yeah,
is very
I can
choppy.
hear most of the I can hear most of the things being said. Actually, I'm here. I'm following.
Okay, okay. It's like listening.
I mean, I think I think the audio has been fixed. I mean, initially it was pretty bad, but I think now it's okay.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I do have a
Uh,
question. Oh, if Peter's done. Go, Peter.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about the Open Documentation Academy. And so, I mean, with the new with non-canonical documentation coming in, I think that's the plan, right? To bring external project, non-canonical project into the fold. So I mean, because I've been thinking, like, I mean, Canonical being a company that has a lot of technical writers, right? I mean, some of the projects are exciting, but I mean, most are just like, they're just it's I mean, personally, I would like projects that that are more that are more what's the word now? I mean, it's not like most of the projects like I see at Canonical are projects that most of the most of the it's been, I mean, Canonical writers already like set the pace for the set the pace for the documentation, and it's just like for you to chip in, make it better, enhance it. But I mean, like, I feel like I feel like with non-canonical projects coming in now, I feel like there would be like projects that require like external contributors like us to basically own the entire process, right? I mean, like, maybe like probably not individually, can be like a group or something. But yeah, basically what I'm saying is, I mean, personally, I would like projects that you can like own the process more, like not something that, I mean, something that you're like you feel more, if you it feels more like, it feels more than like you're contributing to it, more like you're actually like defining, you're part of the people defining, I don't know, the foundation. Basically that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm
Are you asking?
if I'm to make that assumption that the non-canonical projects coming in will have that kind of characteristic.
I didn't really understand the question. I'm sorry. Are you saying that it's good that external projects get involved, and maybe it would be great if they had control over the tasks that they ran and how they were done?
Yeah, I'm saying it's good that external projects are coming in, and I'm saying the projects probably get external contributors like me to to do more than just help shape the documentation, or help enhance the documentation. I mean, more like you're like defining the very foundation of it. I mean, like the cost project now, for instance. I mean, they don't even have, I mean, I think I don't know, I can't remember his name, sorry, but he said they've not really been into documentation, right? So I'm saying that kind of project, right? It feels like, as a contributor, it feels like you're really part of the foundation of documentation process. That's basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think and I think that we'd like lots of as many projects as possible to collaborate on the academy, and really the central idea has always been that the task list is as varied and as broad as it possibly could be. So, I mean, even with talking to Thunderbird today, a lot of their documentation is in the code. They use Sphinx to build it, but they also use wrapper scripts to pull the various locations of the documentation into a single docs folder which Sphinx needs. And that doesn't sound to me like the best way of doing such a thing. But I'm not an expert on Sphinx, but there are probably lots of things in there that aren't directly writing or editing related that could do with some help coordinating and also implementing. And I'd love to have those kind of things in the academy.
Yeah, we already had a few tasks like that. Like we had some of the VALE stuff we put into the academy, which is more about tooling, and that was great because we found people to pick up those tasks and work on them, and they were grateful that they could contribute something because they didn't feel their writing skills were strong enough, but they were still able to pick up a task and deliver.
Yeah.
My interpretation of the Thunderbird stuff is that they're using Sphinx because it has enough functionality to pull out documentation from code. They're using that part of Sphinx, but they're not actually using Sphinx as the compiler for the documentation, which then means they need to pull all of that out, and then it needs to be in a format that's supported by their documentation tooling, which is why it all gets shoved into a single folder.
Oh, I see.
So I had a quick look at their documentation, and it's either a very custom Sphinx deployment, or it's something else that they're just using that aspect of Sphinx, which is fun. But yeah, it'll be interesting working through those sorts of problems. I'm really excited because I think that it's a good opportunity for us to get big issues from overprinting from Thunderbird and us to sort of like facilitate the development of that documentation and give guidance to people who are getting in. And I think that it's going to grow. Like one of the, I love that aspect of this project.
Yeah. And I mean, we've also always wanted the task list to cover all the kind of things that we do. And another thing that Thunderbird mentioned was they have lots of bugs being filed, not enough people triaging those bugs. And while that's not a direct documentation task, a lot of us triage bugs, especially the documentation issues, or to identify documentation issues, label those bugs correctly, and then without even taking them any further. And that's a part of the jobs for a lot of us. To ask another question from our question list?
I have one question.
Yeah.
Because we also use Sphinx, and as I understood, you are not using Sphinx. What tools do you use for documentation?
We are using Sphinx.
Oh, you are using Sphinx because.
Well, yeah, no, there's a few different tools that the company uses. Like there's we use Discourse as the basis for some documentation, and then we've got some custom tooling that then builds that into various documentation sites. So stuff like Juju, Snapcraft, Snapd, all of the charms use that solution, but a lot of our documentation is moving to Sphinx. We have like a starter pack, which is it's trying to be as available and accessible for all of us to use for our projects without removing any of the flexibility of Sphinx, but also keeping all of our like tooling consistent and things like that. So we have like style guide checks through VALE, hopefully very soon will be enabled. We have like spelling checks and like automated sort of workflows through there. So it sort of sets up like, because we built through Read the Docs as well. So that is a large portion. I think we have 135 projects on Read the Docs right now. They're both internal and external, so it's quite a lot of documentation sets using Sphinx exclusively because we don't use any other platforms there.
Do you have any problems with using Sphinx, or do you wish you were using something else?
My other question would be, do you use some GUI editor for it, or just type with Sphinx syntax and it's fine for you?
So it really depends on who's doing the work. A lot of people are really big fans of, it is basically just Git contributions of documents. But a lot of people are really big fans of the MIST extended markdown syntax rather than RST. I personally don't know why. But if that's what they want to do, that's fine. That's okay. I have a be in my bonnet about that, and I understand that I'm in the minority there. So, but yeah, no, there's no like graphical interface or anything that we use for documentation in that respect.
Because before we had Wiki and we had a lot of contributions, and now we have Sphinx on GitHub and we have none contributions.
1 in 2 years.
Okay, 1 in 2 years.
We should definitely talk tomorrow, see if there's anything that we can do to help. I don't know.
Yeah, we
I don't
can
know.
for sure. Yeah.
Because a lot of our documentation, as Michael was just saying, is on Discourse, which does have a web editor and does make it, in theory, very easy for people to contribute. But we've actually found we've had more contributions through putting everything in one place, which is what the Documentation Academy is, even though it's Git, even though we accept it's not the easiest way to get started. We've had a lot more contributions through that than we have through Discourse, even though they've had to overcome. We've tried to support people. We try to, help them understand the process, and then that's kind of part of what the project's about. But so we've not seen a difference in contributions simply because we moved to Git. So I don't know. So Michael mentioned the starter pack, and the intention for the starter pack is very much for other people to be able to use it as well. I mean, it's basically sets you up to create really great looking documentation with everything you need with just a single command.
That comes with a large asterisk right now because Canonical branding is baked into the starter pack right now. So we do need to remove that for it to be something that everyone can use. But yeah, I would like it to be that. Currently, I don't know what you use for Sphinx. We've basically got a bunch of overrides for the Furo theme, which is like a relatively popular one. It's quite minimalist, so it works for most of our documentation sets. Sometimes not for others, in my opinion.
Yeah, we have exactly the same problem that for most of documentation, like a lot of stuff works, but then we have some tables and some other stuff that is we don't really like how it's formatted, and we have like clients that want PDF, and then a lot of tweaking.
PDF's one of my skills in Sphinx because it requires a bunch of like latex overrides to make it not terrible.
Yes, exactly.
PDF is awful. On the note of contributions, is there like a direct edit link or make an issue from the documentation stuff that you have on your documentation at all?
Not really.
No.
That might help with community contributions.
Yeah, this may explain some things. But in your case, people who are making contributions, are these more developers or more users?
So the idea, we're doing this through, it's a bit different for specific projects, and there are people like the Ubuntu server, for example, who do get people contributing who have just wanted to get involved with the project. The Open Documentation Academy idea is a way of helping people who've never made any open source contributions make their first contributions in a friendly and welcoming, a mentoring kind of environment where those of us involved with it help people see an issue through to conclusion, whatever the project happens to be. And this is why we're talking about it'd be great to have projects outside of Canonical. It is documentation issues, but that's because it's a really good place to get started, because you inadvertently end up reading about a product while you're trying to fix an issue, while always also learning how to make a contribution and navigate through pull requests and reviews and updating your pull requests. And that's what we're trying to do. So a lot of the people that are contributing are completely new and not necessarily technical, although some have been developers.
Not to pull us away from the open documentation.
Yeah.
Depending on the product, there is engagement in the community with feedback on GitHub and people creating issues and even PRs sometimes. So I think having that visibility enables that. But obviously there are projects that have no real engagement. Potentially the users aren't there, or they're not bothered about it. They're experienced enough with the product that they don't care if they run into an issue. They'll figure it out themselves and they won't bother giving us feedback. But I've seen a few projects that do get relatively regular issues created on GitHub for, oh, could you fix this? It's not working.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about your project?
We have open source network monitoring tool, NetXMS, and we are struggling that we're developing much more that we're documenting. And a lot of stuff is just sometimes documented in the forum when people ask and we just answer. And sometimes people just come to the forum and like make a huge topic about that. I did that and that, and this is how I did it. So, and this probably could go to the documentation, but yeah.
Well, there is one brilliant example, which just the whole topic went into docs with some minor changes, basically.
Yeah.
So we could, I mean, we could, the academy could genuinely help with that kind of thing if you were open to collaborating on it.
We will be happy.
Yeah, for anybody watching this, we actually were right next to each other in the booth area of the summit, so we can actually speak to each other. This is like the most we've talked to each other in the last 2 days or day and a half. But we really would like to have other projects involved. It's been easier to set it up, of course, with Canonical projects, and we have 12 Canonical projects or 13 currently involved with the academy, but that's because it's easier for us. We're on those teams, and there's so much open source going on in Canonical, but it was always the intention to have a broader community. Shall I try another question?
Can I ask you a question, Graham?
Yeah, go on.
So I was really curious about this. If there was one thing you could change about how you work, what would it be?
So you've asked me this on something that will go in the public record.
Well, I mean, the way let's frame it better. Like, if there's something you could change about how you work with documentation, okay, not in general. It's too broad.
Well, we have to ask you in public because in private you'd lash out.
Yeah. Oh, whose question was that? It's difficult being put on the spot, isn't it?
I think it was your question, Graham.
I get very easily distracted by. I wish I could be more focused for a longer period of time, but the way that I seem to work, and maybe I can work on this, is really to switch between several different things almost at the same time. And I find that with working through documentation problems, a lot of it is, and maybe I shouldn't admit this, but a lot of it is intuitive. I don't know. There's things that I don't know how to explain or how to unravel or how to decode in a way that I feel would be appropriate for my job. And I haven't got a method or a process. I don't know. It's kind of magic that I look at it and I don't understand it and I'm confused, but I'll go off and do something else. And it feels really unproductive. I always kind of beat myself up for that, but at some point, at some other point, I mean, I'll often go for a walk and I'll just, that's the way to do it. And that doesn't really answer your question, but I actually feel bad. I feel like if I'd have learned a better way of doing this, if I was more, because actually none of us, very few of us have a technical writing background. I don't know, a technical writer taught this in technical writer school. I certainly don't know how to do it better.
I think it's really interesting because we all work in different ways. For example, for me, it would be, I would let go of the perfectionism bug, right? So until it's really good, you can't put it out. But no, we can put it out there because it's going to be useful anyway. So this is something that, if I could change about myself.
Do you have medicine? Do you have medicine for that?
No, you just have to like just put it out there.
That was something I was talking to Graham about earlier today, where it's like, I think documentation is a problem where there's no perfect solution to it. There's always a better way of communicating, or the way that everything happens evolves, and suddenly there's a new, better way of doing something or writing something a certain way, and then So I've always accepted, well, for the last 10 years or so, I've accepted that everything I try sucks. But it gets better every time that you do something and you change it, and you get feedback from users, you can fix the problems that they're having, and you're constantly making improvements. The same way that you have continuous integration and continuous deployment for like agile software development, you're always improving. What you're doing now is never done. It's never perfect.
Yeah, but with those, you actually have objective parameters you can optimize for, right? So you can set the requirement, follow it, and as long as you in the margin, like you already passed the bar. With documentation, though, where is the bar? It's so subjective.
You can try and set it yourself.
Like I should aim for 75% quality. How do you?
No. But even with code, I should aim for 75% quality.
But this is the perfectionism part. You know, you set your own standard, even if you cannot measure it precisely. So you basically say, okay, I should do better than that. But you cannot measure it. It's just your own perception.
I think I just have to, I think I've just come to accept that I will always feel shame whenever anyone's reading documentation I've written. So I'm just like,
I think that's universal. Yeah.
That means it's never perfect. It's never done. Like
I'm feeling differently. Like as a hobby, I'm doing pottery, and when you do something, it doesn't look like you want to look it. Then there is a hack. You should leave it for a month or a few months. You already don't remember what you didn't like about it, and next time you see it, you like it already. So for me, it's the same for documentation. When I try to find something and like, oh, I wrote it. Oh, it exists. and usually it's enough. I just can send it to the user to make him do what he wanted to do.
Otherwise, there is one pottery piece in our booth.
Yeah, mine.
I can see it.
Yeah.
That's very true. I think that really applies. Yeah. Peter.
I have a question. Yeah, I wanted to ask, would you suggest to a new technical writer or a junior technical writer generally to have a niche, or would you just say like keep an open mind and just learn the basics, like the foundation, right? Or would you say like try to have a niche? Because honestly, I read a post recently that said, that was just like making an argument that technical writers, junior technical writers should try to have a niche. So do you think technical writers should try to have a niche, or do you just think just learn the basics and keep an open mind and you might find yourself eventually having a niche? Or do you think you have to work towards having a niche from the start? I'm asking everyone.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if anybody wants to. Yeah.
I mean, the easy answer is that API docs have always been in high demand and they're high paid positions. So if you can work your way towards that and be really good at it, that's great. But I mean, you need to be flexible and you need to understand how to write as the basis, and like there's so much you need to learn in being a technical writer or a technical author, and there's so much out there across a wide range of things. Like, I think I wouldn't be here now if I wasn't just flexible. Like, I never found a niche to really sit in and get really competent in. I was getting close, and then I got.
I think this is a niche. I think being a technical writer for Linux-related documentation or even developer-led documentation is a niche. I know technical authors who work, in huge pools, almost, I don't want to say it, but almost like a typing pool in an organization where they're just part of many layers. And they don't have that. So we're already in this kind of niche, even before you start talking about APIs.
I guess I don't feel specialized, which is what I'm thinking about.
But you are, would you be able to write hardware documentation, medical equipment documentation? We are already strongly specialized in software and a particular type of software, right? Aren't we?
Speak for yourself. I think I could take a fair stab at hardware documentation.
Okay.
I have previously done that. So
Really?
I started out in data centers and doing hardware.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I mean, I've kind of floated around to a bunch of different things, and as I said, I wouldn't be here now if I wasn't flexible with my choices and going, oh, I could tackle that.
I think there are two there are two things here, aren't there? There's the skills and abilities of a writer, which are to a certain extent, to some extent, universal. And then there's the knowledge required to understand the subject area. So, yeah, sure. If you want to specialize in something, then that cuts out a lot of learning about different technologies and stuff. But you do still need the writing skills. But a lot of people, I don't know. I mean, I got into writing that stuff because I liked trying different things. So, you know, for me, like specializing in a very tight area is exactly not what I want to do.
And I think, to go back to Peter's question, write something that you're interested about.
Yeah.
Because especially at the beginning, you've got to be self-motivated, and that self-motivation, I think, can only come from being something that you really care about, and that will be your niche.
Interesting. I just in the end of September made a piece, like a workshop about technical writing as a career, and I literally made a slide about a skill tree for a technical writer, because there are different branches, often quite independent from each other, of what you can do as a technical writer, what skills you can obtain. And yes, you can probably try to tackle it all and be quite universal and do everything well, but it's still hard to do. That's why the advice, at least I gave to the basically whoever watched it, is that try to tackle at least one or two of them, not all of them at once, at least at the beginning. You see, if you concentrate your efforts, you will get results sooner. But I totally understand the notion of just not wanting to be specialized in one particular area, but rather you're just curious about what about that one? Oh, I'd like to do that too. And I'm also feeling that myself, and I'm also kind of have this experience all over the place.
I should reiterate, I don't think I do any of it well, so that's why.
One day you'll find something you're good at.
Eating. That's not a job then.
I'd like to add something. Don't you also think that it's also a bit about personality that you have, how you write? Some people like to write very detailed, so maybe they're very good in how-to guides, and other people think more from a conceptual point of view, and maybe are better in explaining stuff. Do you feel that as well?
So I do feel that I write too much detail sometimes. Yeah. Oh, really, it's really hard, at least for me sometimes, to write a shorter version of the same instruction, but it's actually so much better. So when I see the result of me trying for maybe for an hour to just compress the whole step-by-step guide, for example, right? And I see the end result, which is half the size, I immediately see the benefit. It's so much easier to just go through it. Obviously, it's hard to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But those are like a different aspects of the same skill there. It's about understanding what it is you're trying to communicate and vaguely who you're trying to communicate it to. So I don't know, it's like if you study fine art or something, you won't just learn how to paint things in a certain way, although people will always have their individual styles. You learn different ways to tackle, you know, different things that you're trying to create. And I think it's the same with, I think people, we actually don't really talk about any of these things enough, but yeah, Graham and I both come from a background working in magazines, and there were all sorts of different skills you had to master in that. When you were creating covers, you had to be very concise, but also impactful with the words, like individual choices of words. How much, you know,
Yeah.
We used to argue for hours about like 8 words in a little box on
Yeah.
on
It's
one
just
page.
like we are hiring.
But then when like sometimes you'll be doing an interview or doing some sort of technology explanation inside, and that's a very different, you know, it's a different set of skills. And I think to be a great technical writer, you need to be aware that there are, you know, times when you apply different styles.
Maybe don't you think that some people have different preferences?
Oh yeah, sure.
They can apply it, but by nature maybe they use a lot of details, or by nature they are writing very conceptually.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think some people are predisposed to being better at certain things, but
Yeah.
as Nick said, like it's skill to do all of those different things, and as you keep doing it, you get better at it. And people around this table that I know as technical authors, I haven't seen anything bad come out of it.
I can show you a few of mine.
Again, my own. But as
I can show you a few of my bad. I have written things.
One of the core principles that I learned from technical writer school, I did a degree in creative and professional writing, is to kill your darlings, which is a concept of cutting out things, and usually it's for the better, even if you think that what you just cut out was amazing and like good detail to have, but it's all in the vein of creating a great final product, and usually by doing that you are doing that, even though it's hard. So
it is hard, and in fact I do have a strategy for that, and it sounds like it's very similar to seeing good in your pottery. It's like move away from it, forget that you wrote it, and come back to it, and you see something with much more analytical clarity.
This advice of moving away from a piece of documentation to maybe more objectively assess it, it's not very helpful when you actually at the task of writing it and you have a deadline like today.
No.
So what I have for you as an advice is that really structuring your thoughts and making out of chaos of the whole set of information you need something meaningful, like a step-by-step instruction with a tutorial or something. It is a craft you need to learn through experience, through a lot of exhausting hours trying to work out how to do it properly. And above all, as I said before, there is no objective way of measuring it. You're just doing a good job if you someone else tells you so. And it's really hard sometimes to understand what kind of job you did, how bad is it, other than give it to someone else who might not be interested in it. And the worst part of, we actually work in a very interesting industry of open source software. And open source software, well, it's famous for it being free, and being free means that our clients, our users, our readers are not so invested in this particular product. For them, it's not like they paid for it, right? So the budget of their attention and time is quite small. We need to basically accommodate for that. We need to write documentation in such a way they will actually not be too bored. They will get to the point they need. They will be successful with using this product, even though they are not super invested in. That's additional challenge, I think.
I think that's a very good question, because before I joined here, everything I used to write now looks like an explanation. I used to explain every single thing, and now with the data access, at least it constrains me, and I think, well, I want to, it's not about me, it's not about what I have to say, it's about what I really need. So I think, well, this is my tutorial, I want to add this, but this can wait and go to the explanation.
That's a very nice way to structure it, the framework. Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
We had one of the previous questions, how do you explain the job, right?
Yeah.
And I actually, well, there is a direct way of explaining what a software is, what software development is, what the software documentation is, and it can work for some, but for me, it quite often works better if I explain with analogy. So basically, if we consider a user using the software as a journey and trying to be a pathfinder and a map keeper of some kind, right? So the more detailed your map, the more the chances is that something will change on the landscape, and it will be outdated and will be confusing. So you have to find the right amount of detail on your map for it to be easy to navigate, but not be outdated too soon.
Especially screenshots.
That's why we try to avoid screenshots whenever we can. even though they can be, you know, an IKEA manual wouldn't be an IKEA manual with a million illustrations.
There
I don't
are
think
a
it's, they
couple
have
of
screenshots. They're like some infographic
Yeah,
style.
infographics.
there are a couple of tools you can use to automate it, but you also need the hardware set up to have it
And the
be
back-
running all the time
Yeah,
and
yeah.
make the right screenshot, the right version, and all that stuff. And any major changes to UI also breaks that as well. So
Yeah.
it's still hard to maintain even with that sort of setup, unfortunately.
Yes, Sally.
I have a frivolous question.
All right.
If you had to document your product using the IKEA style of diagrams, how difficult would that be for you? Just as a general question to everybody in the room.
I mean, for me, not that hard, which is funny, but it's a nuance of the specific products that I work on that would facilitate that. It's sort of like providing a proxy and, you know, some level of customizability of something that already exists. It's like, yeah.
Hex spanner for YAML, because otherwise I don't think.
It's really hard to do so. IKEA style illustrations are not that simple as you think. There are quite a lot of thought being put to that. I heard they really have some research on how to avoid this regional context biases, basically for everyone from any culture being able to understand what's going on in that picture. And that's really hard task to do when we're talking about software and some interfaces like command lines. And I would still need to put some words in there in some language. And that's not what they do.
But I feel at least our product would benefit from this kind of documentation.
Yeah. That may be the way to go. I mean, it may be something to look, but creating diagrams is really difficult.
Yeah.
But why do we even go
good diagrams? Yeah.
If our targeted audience is not general audience, but rather some professionals? For my products, it's also kind of must be a software developer or DevOps engineer to actually install this. So by design, we don't have to go full IKEA here.
I think that's kind of part of the the silliness of the question, but yeah, how hard would it be to explain it if you had to? Like, we're not considering our users in this case, just a question, because that sort of simplicity is kind of what you want to aim for with documentation, something that's really simple but able to be understood by everyone.
I think actually the closest analogy and closest approach I see to implement exactly that, like in real life, would be a let's play style video with our product, like literally on YouTube, just going through this steps, the tutorial. That would work, and that would be as close as possible to the IKEA style instruction.
The Inkscape workshop, which we had yesterday, would be exactly that.
Great.
When you look at the recording of that one.
Yeah. I mean, there are exceptions, but when I get IKEA furniture and have to put it up, I don't think the instructions are very good a lot of the time. I mean, because of that, removing all bias, it sometimes makes it very difficult to interpret the meaning behind a lot of the intention in some of those illustrations. And that may be just like a revision.
I think IKEA is not the right example in this scenario. I think Lego would be a better one. And I think having a visual and having something with pictures would make the software so much more accessible for people who are not techno geeks. And it will have to be necessary in the future. Every software there is has a design language. So buttons moves, text changes, but the general idea, the general placement does not change. So if you can use that, and you would have to talk to the GUI designer themselves to figure out what is it that makes them tick and what is it that makes them use the GUI the way they do. But so taking away all detail, making I don't know how you describe it, but make it as simplistic as possible. The way IKEA does it, huh? They take away all the texture. It's a wireframe. that would make it usable, and that would make it usable far into the future, even when the GUI itself is redesigned, at least in part.
But what about products without a GUI? What about Python itself? How would you represent that as a diagram? There's
no, but for Python, in my mind, for Python, there's no value add, because Python, it's code, it is written down, so you read it.
Yeah, so you wouldn't do it for that.
No.
I think Lego and IKEA is the same thing. You have assembly instructions for a Lego set of a piece of furniture. You assemble it one time, so you have a how to assemble it. But for Python, you do many different things throughout your life with it, so you should need a tutorial and in addition an explanation. Now, no, the fourth thing also, the thing which describes everything systematically.
I think it's just a fun thought experiment.
Yeah,
Right.
I want to try and, it's a good question, because I want to try
There is
and,
a question behind the question, because like one of the reasons why it's so successful, like that, like yes, it has its problems, and yes, sometimes you end up putting the wrong thing in the wrong place and everything falls apart. But the problem that it avoids is the one of localization, which means it's more accessible. Because one of the big problems that we have, especially in open source documentation, is the fact that there are just so many languages that people want to access the documentation in, and it's so hard to find the people to actually learn to localize. It's a very highly specialized skill, localization. And so, like, this is the way that IKEA and Lego, they get around it by just having no languages or just numbers and pictures. I forgot what the question was, but that was the reason behind the question.
My only point there would be it's not entirely removed of bias because it does use Arabic neurals. So, I think. Oh, sorry. Yeah. But that abstraction that happens, like, it isn't quite universal. It's really close. It's probably about as close as you can get. But I think that it sort of represents how much of an impossibility it kind of is for documentation in general to get.
I think they also have a large advantage over a lot of the products that we document in that they know where you're starting from.
Yeah.
You have all the bricks in the bag in front of you, and nothing pre-existing, you put it together. Whereas pretty much everything we write, we already have to make assumptions about what OS people are running, what resources they have on the machine that they're running it on, etc., etc. I mean, you know, some products are more complicated than others, and
well, to some degree, they also have this problem of something is missing from the package. That's why they have this diagram and listing all the elements with the quantities there. So they do solve it with the prerequisite section like we do. You have to install this first.
Yeah, I can also add a bit on the Lego. I worked for a couple of years as Lego Robotics club teacher. And yeah, so I've had a lot of observation how kids like grade 2, 3 were following these instructions. And it was pretty straightforward. They felt like really comfortable because it's like someone guiding them by the hand, and and then once per month we had kind of creative day when there were no instructions at all. And like for first couple of times, it was really shocking for kids because it totally swept them off track, because like they were coming like, can I have this computer with instruction? And no, like do the Python way, code something. So yeah, that's there is a thing of comfort and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Even though we have network monitoring and we're thinking that administrators and DevOps will come and read and understand everything, we have a lot of students that come and try, and I feel it's especially important for the students, for those who are currently learning and will change afterwards everything, to be able to use open source. Because it's like it's something that is for me important, and yeah, that's why we should think of people that will come that they won't know a lot of things when they will read documentation.
It is. I was just thinking we've done a lot of these sessions and thinking about how information is presented in for different industries in different ways. Like we did synth manuals and then recipe. And I was just thinking about workshop manuals for motorcycles. They explain they often have pictures and very detailed diagrams and explanations of the steps. Mostly they're how to change the brake pads or something. But what they won't ever do is explain how to use a spanner or something, because they naturally make the assumption if you're going to take the brakes off your bike and replace them, you know what a spanner is, even,
Yeah.
So again, there's a degree of assumed knowledge, and sometimes, as you point out, that can be
that
dangerous.
Can be like, yeah, a lot of people just don't know how to install Postgres that is required for our products, and it's another step.
Well, it was in one electrician handbook, like there were several grades. One grade should obey all safety requirements. The other level should understand and obey all safety requirements.
Yeah, and what's the level next?
But in our case, one observation is that a lot of users don't really want to go and to read documentation, and we have a Telegram support channel, which allows quickly ask question and hopefully get answer, especially if the person is not too annoying and like not asking something. Can someone help me on the next day? Something like that. And so for many people, ideal way would be somehow the universe would answer their questions.
Yeah.
And in my previous work, I can't speak too much about it, but we developed some bespoke products that are only sold to one client, and they would just have the phone number of the lead developer and would call them any time of day or night because it was an operational issue. It was like treated with high severity, and they wouldn't even look at the documentation. They'd just say, "This wasn't working. Tell me how to fix it." Just the person, not even relying on the fact that we had to take go through and put a bunch of stuff together. So yeah, I think it really, if you're providing that sort of access, people are going to use it.
Yeah, the threshold is pretty low.
You've got me thinking that in my projects, I'm trying to get the developers to write some documentation before they even start writing any code. And it feels a little bit like that's a task for developers they find painful. But us trying to create an illustration before we start documenting stuff seems kind of similar, and tackle the same kind of assumptions you might make in the way you document something.
But developers should produce exactly text. Is there an option for them to record a screencast or just audio?
It's not yet ready, Philip.
Yeah, it's not been done, and the idea is for them to confront themselves really with, oh God, this sounds very clunky and convoluted, and it's impossible to explain. Well, if it's impossible to explain, maybe you might consider redesigning it.
Exactly. When it's in your head, it sounds logical. When you put it to paper, you see that's not possible.
Yeah.
And you start. Is the amount of effort required to do this actually quite significant? Of course, you can prevent a lot of additional effort of implementing the impossible with just incorrect stuff. And that's actually how the software development is done. There's actually more than just writing the code.
I mean, a lot of what I deal with, I don't want to call it over engineering, but it's engineering. It's engineering.
Under engineering is also an option.
Yeah. The full capabilities of the software is the architecture, so that it interoperates with so many different things. You miss the kind of the vertical slice of what it's designed to actually do, how most people will interact with it. And the developer was free to document that as they built it. You get something that's incredibly difficult to decode and like I was saying before, and write into something that people can use. Whereas even if they do end up developing in that way, if they were to start off thinking about how people are going to be using the features that they're developing, even if they are really complicated and interoperability is a big thing, it would really help.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the same degree of freedom that they have when they develop a software, right? The whole expression power of the software development language, any like language for programming, it's actually, I see the very same in us writing documentation. We use, well, in our case, English language, but really any natural language, we use it as a professional tool. Like they would use the programming language to the same degree of freedomness, where we can express ourselves. However, we can do that. And there are many ways of doing that we will achieve our goal, actually providing how-to guide or tutorial. And the rest is the craft, the tricky part.
Yeah.
I have a slightly right.
Yeah, I wanted to speak about I'll speak about that. Yeah, I actually believe that if technical writers or documentation process, if technical writers generally are more involved in the building, in the product development process, I generally believe this issue. I'm not saying it can be solved completely or something, but it can be curbed in some ways, because I've documented the product before, and while I was documenting the product, I was wondering how some of the issues that I was discovering during the process of documenting, how they even managed to bypass the development process. So I actually believe that I actually believe that if technical writers, the user perspective and everything that we have, if technical writers can be more involved in the development process, I believe like some of these issues are things that really can be curbed during the development process before even get to the documentation.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if Nick, you want to say what you were going to say, and I'll certainly come back to what Peter's asking.
Well, all I was going to say was to, I guess, reframe some of that in the form of another question. Is there any? Have you ever had anything that you refuse to document because it doesn't make sense? Because I have.
In my case, there are things where the documentation hasn't appeared, even if I've not flat out refused to do it.
Right.
As a developer, I just rewrite the program if it doesn't make sense, and then document in the right way.
Excellent.
Or it's obvious through the documentation that it's so painful that they've got to. The only way to redress this is to actually redesign the feature.
Yeah.
I had multiple cases of actually trying to ask additional questions to developers. Why are we doing it like that? Which led to not writing documentation, but changing the software to do it in a different way.
Yeah.
That happened.
And I think onto your question, Peter, about should we be involved with the development process more closely, I think the answer is yes. And that's one of the reasons why at Canonical we work on the engineering teams. We go to our daily stand-ups usually with the software engineers who are developing the products, and that's still difficult. It's still very difficult to influence the design decisions that are being made about the implementation details. But I do think it's something that we could help with. But they need to be prepared to listen, and in my experience that's difficult because they're solving difficult implementation details and not necessarily focused on how something will be documented and therefore used by people.
I can probably, I mean, one of the things that recently I refused to document was a status command. And I will not reveal for what product to save the guilty. But given the idea that there was a status command for this software, the engineers decided to basically list everything they could think of that they knew internally from the software, like every bit of config, every IP address, and like literally everything. And the output was 3 pages long. And that is of use to nobody. That is of use to absolutely nobody. That mistake was thinking about what information could we provide and not thinking about what information should we provide. What do people actually want? Why are people going to run this command? And I think that is, it's not, don't really blame them for that, because I can see where that idea
Especially in
came
network
from.
monitoring software.
Yeah.
It's really hard from the programmer perspective understand what the end user wants from us.
Right, yeah, okay. But that is actually a good place where a technical author can provide some helpful input and say, well, you know, in this case, the user probably only wants to know the IP address the thing's at and whether it's actually running or not, you know. And then you can obviously stick extra parameters after that if you really want to get the config out of something, but you know, just vomiting the whole thing into the console isn't terribly helpful.
Yeah.
Really, the role of a technical author, technical writer here could be very significant, but it's significant because they go there without the prior knowledge that developers have about how it should behave. So they don't have these assumptions when they arrive, and they just know some story told by the developer what it should do. You don't know why it does that. That actually helps. That solves a lot of cognitive biases, and we see objectively that, well, we wanted to do something with that, but we are not getting there because we have some problems. So technical author, technical writer could be some kind of manual testing at this point. Without the curse of knowledge, they experience the user experience, the daily experience, basically testing the UX. And I'm not sure it's the most effective way of using technical writers since they have additional skills and baggage of knowledge, but it's still quite often, I at least find myself in that role.
Yeah,
me too.
And we listen our technical writer.
Right.
I mean, a lot of that sort of stuff comes from unintended consequences of specific implementation rather than something that can really be pulled out in the design stages. There are much more obvious that's a bad choice that you're making there. But other times sometimes you only really see that there's a problem with something once it has been implemented and you're suddenly like, oh, we've done this poorly. We need to take a step back. And I think that's difficult to add any value there as a technical author when some things are in those design phases and implementation phases. And
so yeah, and sometimes, I mean, again, I'm not going to mention any names, but I remember that there was one thing, there was a tool that we had that if you created things and you could also remove things, and then one customer removed something that was actually really important, and they complained and said, you know, you shouldn't just allow people to remove things without warning them first. So then they added, you had to like go to an extra step and add an extra flag saying, yes, I, you know, really want to remove this. But then other customers complained because they couldn't automate stuff anymore. So the solution was to add yet another flag on, and then you sort of, it was like a whole double negative thing going on where you had to really think about exactly, maybe that was the intention, but you had to really think about something very carefully to do what you intended to do.
Just recently, I think, discussed with the documentation team, like as a documentation practice discussion, whether we should add, I don't remember which documentation that was and who asked the question, but whether we should add some kind of a warning about a particular issue that user might make this error that will lead to some bad weeks, I would say. So yes, I think the notion that we got there is that there is a cost of any error. So if the cost of this error will lead to very bad weeks of them actually having to spend quite a lot of effort to get back to the initial state to revert there, basically, then we might as well provide this warning. If the cost is not that significant, it might be better to just shorten the documentation without this additional admonition warning, because a lot of warnings will also be so it's all trade-off.
And then there is a question of consistency.
Yeah.
If it's asking in one place, which is expensive, and not asking in another, but they look the same way.
So each case could be assessed in terms of cost of error.
Yeah.
Peter said, not the thing that you just said, Vladimir, but the thing just before that. I love what Vladimir said. So I think you have a fan. I think we've been talking for quite a while. I think we should wrap it up. It's been a long week. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for volunteering your time. Thanks for joining. And thanks for those of you online. I'll put this up some other time. But yeah, until then, we'll hopefully see you next week or the week after. I'm not sure. But bye.
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 Bye.